We already got Soda of Christ. How old are you? Hello? Christ Pepsi.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, how old are you?
I'm 23.
Nice. What are your pronouns?
What are my pronouns? I'm a man, so he, him, I guess.
Yep, that would be pronouns that are generally used for men. What would you like to talk about?
What led you to the conclusion on the prompt?
Well, so like just any of them? Either three of the prompts?
Yeah, just any one of them.
Okay. Essentially for all of them, it's a lack of evidential support. There's just no evidence to suggest that Jesus was a historical figure that walked around Judea. There's also no historical information that the disciples existed prior to the Gospels, and that there's no evidence that a physical crucifixion on the face of the earth actually took place in the first century of the Jesus character that Paul knew.
What evidence would you expect to see for a first century Jewish rabbi?
Well, I mean, I would expect somebody to mention his life and ministry prior to his crucifixion or his death in general. Why? Yeah,
he was just what people thought to be another failed Messiah amongst many. Why would anyone?
I mean, if they thought that he was a failed Messiah, then Christians wouldn't be around here now, right?
I mean, before his crucifixion.
Okay, well then he wouldn't have been a failed Messiah if it was before his crucifixion.
You said you would expect somebody to write about him before his crucifixion.
Not like somebody was writing about him like during his ministry. What I mean is that like it could be during his ministry. I mean, fuck, I don't know. But what I'm saying is that I would expect somebody to write about his ministry prior to his crucifixion. So like it could have been in Paul's letters, where he could have mentioned like some of his ministry or the fact that he walked around Judea gathering people or something like that. Like there are subtle ways in which he could have mentioned the ministry of Jesus without getting into too many of the nitty-gritty details about it. But what we find in Paul is that he mentions that, Jesus is a revelatory being, that Paul never got his information from any historical figure or any human person. He got it only from Scripture, which would have been written way before Jesus ever existed, if he even did. And he got his information from revelation or hallucinations.
Yeah, sure. I don't understand why, like, who would you expect to write about him?
Paul
didn't write about Jesus?
Paul didn't write about an earthly Jesus before his crucifixion, no.
Paul didn't know him. He never claimed to know him before his crucifixion.
He didn't have to know him before his crucifixion in order to mention things that Jesus supposedly did before his crucifixion.
Okay, so Paul writing about Jesus in general doesn't count, though.
Well, no, because Paul explicitly says, that he didn't get his information from any human witness, that he only got it directly from Jesus after he resurrected and from reading the Scriptures. So Paul had hallucinations and he read way too much of the Scriptures, and he developed his theology, which was the same theology that the other apostles.
Which Scriptures did Paul read, do you think?
Well, it would have been Septuagint, and then there's probably some scripture out there that Paul was reading or considered to be scriptures that we don't have access to anymore. We know that
do those not count?
Huh?
Do those not count?
They do count. The only way that we really know that there were those kinds of scriptures out there is because, like in, I believe it's either Mark or Matthew, they make vague references to scripture that we don't have. And right. So we know that those kinds of scriptures definitely existed. We just don't know what they said or where their information comes from.
But it's okay to infer that there was probably someone who did write about Jesus before Paul, right?
Nope.
Why?
Because we just, Paul is our first written account of this Jesus person.
But he references other accounts that you already acknowledge exist.
Right, scriptures that were written before Jesus ever walked around the earth. That's what scriptures are. It's not like, I'm not saying that the scriptures are about Jesus. I'm saying that the scriptures are Jewish scriptures that were written hundreds of years, like 100 years or more before Jesus.
So you think Paul was saying that he got his information about Jesus from the Torah? Is that what you're saying?
No, from the Septuagint is what he would be reading from.
And that's where he got the thing that never mentions Jesus. That's where he got his info on Jesus from.
Right. It doesn't mention Jesus. It mentions the Messiah, and there are some legit prophecies in there about the Messiah proclaiming what the Messiah is to do, but none of them are directly about the Jesus character, unless you partake in the Pesherim that was created by like maybe Philo of Alexandria in the early 1st century, or the Pesherim that Paul engaged in.
Gotcha. I'm certainly not an expert on this matter, but why do you think most mainstream historians disagree with you?
I think most mainstream New Testament scholars, just to be very specific here, it's not most. So, like, I hate it when people say most mainstream new historians, because we're not talking about the whole of historians, because the whole of historians are going to reference the supposed experts in the field. The supposed experts in the field are going to be New Testament scholars and textual critics. And the reason why they do it is because the majority of them are going to be dogmatically believing Christians, and they are convinced by old information that Jesus actually did walk around on earth. But as Richard Carrier's obsolete paradigm of the historical Jesus has shown, New Testament scholarship is drifting farther and farther away from the historical consensus and more towards a mythicist one on key concepts that are presented by the mythicist position. And so there's definitely a shift happening, even if the consensus isn't changing with it. It's rather odd that it's not.
Sure, I'd have to look into that more. Just from what I know, most people who make a living about studying this field do disagree with you, which I guess you just acknowledged. But and again, like I said, I'm not an expert. I'm sure they have better arguments than I do. Most of the ones who do
probably don't.
You don't think so?
No, they don't, because they have the same kind and quality of arguments that I hear all the time from lay people online, because lay people have, consumed the bad arguments that the New Testament scholars put out. And I mean, these New Testament scholars, did you know that they even have to make up historical criteria in order to make Jesus real? They have to literally make up historical criteria.
Yeah, give an example.
So like the Aramaic criteria is a good one. This particular one says that if there's any part of the Gospels or any of the scripture that makes more sense in Aramaic, or is actually written in Aramaic, then that most likely traces back to a historical Jesus. But that doesn't make a lot of sense. That's not logically sound, because that would seem to indicate that Jesus was the only one speaking Aramaic. You can't actually discern between just somebody making up some kind of Aramaic saying or somebody pulling from some random Aramaic source versus Jesus actually saying it. There's a built-in assumption there that Jesus said it. So, like, that's one particular invented criteria.
So, and another question, the Synoptic Gospels, those don't count?
I don't count the Synoptic Gospels because there's no good methodology for discerning between historical fact and fiction in those books. And because of that, they're just useless as evidence.
I think I disagree. I mean, but that's fine. Obviously, I'm Christian and you're not, and that's probably why.
Well, I mean, so why do you disagree about the Gospels?
I think the Gospels are true.
Right. But one asked, like, you think that they're written by eyewitnesses?
I don't know if they're written by eyewitnesses. I don't know if John is. I do think Matthew and Mark and Luke probably are, but I don't know if John actually is. I think the scholarly consensus on that is no, if I'm not mistaken, right?
Well, I mean, yeah, considering John is a 2nd century document, but even the Synoptic Gospels that you're talking about, like, if they were written by any kind of reliable historian or whatnot, why do they copy off of each other verbatim at times?
So why do they copy off of each other at times?
Right. So Mark is the first one, and then Matthew copies most of Mark, like 94% or something like that. And then Luke comes in and copies a substantial amount of Mark and also copies Matthew.
Even if that were true, wouldn't it just prove that Matthew and Luke are copies and Mark isn't?
Sure, but I mean, you're left with Mark, and Mark doesn't have the birth narrative. Mark actually has Jesus being adopted as the Son of God, and not being like intrinsically the Son of God. There's a lot of problems with Mark. It contains the weakest of the versions of Jesus, so like, there's just a lot of problems with it.
Yeah, but again, even if I did say, like, yeah, I agree, which I don't know if I do. I'd have to look into it more myself if that's all true. But why doesn't Mark count?
Well, Mark doesn't list like what sources he used in order to get his information. He doesn't take an active participatory role in the history.
What would the sources be?
What would the sources be?
What could they possibly even be?
Well,
if it's claiming to be an eyewitness account, which it seems to be, wouldn't he just be the source, whoever wrote it, even if it wasn't Mark?
I mean, even if it wasn't Mark, I mean, maybe, but he never claims that. He never says that I was the eyewitness.
Oh, so it would only count if he specifically said, I bore witness to these things?
Well, I mean, it would count if it would count more so, I would think, on the scale, if Mark had actually said that, but he doesn't. And he only ever makes allusions to scripture like the Septuagint, the Old Testament scripture that we have that supposedly talks about Jesus.
Right, he was a Jewish person, so it makes sense that he would try to tie in who he claims to be the Messiah to the messianic prophecies.
Right. So
but I don't see why him not saying, like, if I wrote a story and didn't specifically say, I'm not going to say mine, I'm not going to dox myself, but if I didn't say, Ted Mosby, saw this, I don't think that would specifically, like, I don't think that would say that it didn't happen. Like, if someone writes an account of World War II and they don't say, me, Private Ryan, specifically saw this, I don't think that means that, like, none of that shit happened, right?
Well, no, but you would expect that if they are not eyewitnesses of it, then they would cite their sources for who were the eyewitnesses, right? And where they got their information from.
Then infer that they're probably claiming to be an eyewitness since they didn't do that?
No. I mean, that's inventing information right there. So you're inventing information which violates Occam's razor and inherently makes your hypothesis weaker than mine.
So what you haven't even stated the hypothesis. What do you think it is? What do you think the Gospel of Mark is?
Oh, I think it's a hagiography that was a reification of many of the teachings of Paul, and Paul didn't source his information in history. So that and the fact that there's no evidence of where Mark got his information other than the Old Testament scripture. So it seems like we can't discern between being made up or using the Old Testament.
Sure. What if Paul wasn't hallucinating?
What if Paul wasn't hallucinating? Would
that count?
I mean, I think that you'd find it difficult to prove that Paul wasn't hallucinating, considering he admits that he was hallucinating. But even if you could somehow prove,
where does Paul admit he was hallucinating?
When Paul talks about getting information via revelation, revelation is hallucination.
Revelation is hallucination.
Right. It was auditory and visual in nature, as far as I recall from the different ways that Paul describes it, because like, he says that he has, I don't personally agree that when Paul said that he saw the risen Christ, he was talking about a vision. I do believe that he meant that he met Jesus, but even if he was talking about a vision, that doesn't mean that the vision didn't happen. So you think that revelation is a physical meetup with Jesus?
I think revelation can, I can have a revelation about anything.
Okay. And
revelation just means something has been revealed to you.
Right. It's been revealed to you, and that's what happened with Jesus to Paul, but Paul never physically met Jesus. Although Paul did believe in a physical Jesus, he never physically met Jesus. He was only revealed to Paul.
Yeah, I don't see where you're getting the idea that he didn't meet Jesus. I don't think he's saying
because
that.
He never says that he met Jesus. He says that Jesus revealed information to him. That's how I get that. It's just how words work.
So what do you mean by he revealed information to him? Like it came to him in a dream? Is that what you think he's saying?
I mean, it could be a dream. He could have smoked on a doob. I don't know. how he got it. I mean, like fasting and having hallucinations due to fasting is a pretty common thing at that time. There's also schizotypal people that are drawn to those kind of cult groups. And so schizotypal people can have these auditory and visual hallucinations and but still remain like able to take part in society, able to be there in society, I guess, operate in society as normally as possible. So like, yeah, those things are.
Well, like just to give an example, if I told you I was walking to Dallas and then I saw a blinding light and that light spoke to me claiming to be Jesus, what you would say is I didn't actually meet Jesus, right. Or I'm not claiming to have met Jesus. I am saying it came to me in like a dream.
No, I would first of all, I'd send you to a doctor to get some kind of MRI. Well,
let's just ignore that part.
Yeah, let's totally ignore the obvious, brain tumor. I would say
it was a hallucination. I think it was real.
Right. I get that you think it was real, but being able to discern reality from hallucination is the problem with schizotypal behavior as well as the hallucination.
That's cool. But what I'm saying is, if I claim to have seen a blinding light that spoke to me, and that light was Jesus, what you would assume I meant by that is that I never saw the light, and that light wasn't Jesus, and that it was like a.
Okay, since you're going with the Damascus Road story, what else does it say about the Damascus Road story as far as Paul is concerned in Acts?
I'm not sure.
Did anybody else see the blinding light? Did anybody else experience Jesus coming to Paul and revealing himself to Paul?
I don't believe so.
Okay. Then it seems to be a false analogy that you're putting out here.
I didn't say you saw it too.
Right, but you're saying that, you were revealed this information and you think that you physically met Jesus in that moment. But what I'm saying is that in order to be a real analogy here, you would have to say, I was revealed this bright light where Jesus spoke to me. Nobody else could see it or anything like that. What does that sound like to you?
What does it sound like to me?
Yes.
It sounds like I believe that I met Jesus.
So you would go there instead of the obvious hallucination path.
Well, one might think I'm hallucinating, and I might think I'm hallucinating, but I would probably believe I met Jesus, right?
What's the likelihood that you would have actually met Jesus versus suffering a hallucination?
That's not what we're talking about. You're claiming
that's
that
what I'm talking about. No, that's what I'm talking about. If I told you the
exact same story and I said, "Well, I think I met Jesus," you wouldn't say, "You don't think that."
I think that you would think that you met Jesus, but the likelihood of you actually meeting Jesus and that actually being something that happened, I would say is very, 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 very low.
That's awesome. I'm just saying Paul claims to have met Jesus Christ.
Right. And the likelihood of him actually meeting Jesus Christ is very, 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 very low.
Yeah, but why doesn't that count about somebody writing about Jesus Christ?
Did you hear all the varies that I put in there?
Well, that's improper grammar, isn't it?
I was driving home a point that there's a very low likelihood.
I'm just messing with you. Messing with you. Yeah. Okay. So your reasoning for thinking Paul doesn't count is just because you don't believe in supernatural stuff.
I have not seen any evidence for any supernatural thing, but also I have not seen any evidence that validates either the Damascus Road story or anything in Paul's letters that seems to indicate that he knew any kind of like earthly Jesus. Okay,
awesome. So Paul believes he met someone who he believes was named Jesus. Who was that person he believed he met? Just like a random folktale?
Nope. I think that he was revealed information from a pre-existent archangel figure that was already present in Judaism.
That he named Jesus.
And while he was
not that he named the people who believed in Jesus.
Nope, not that
he just changed his mind
No, no.
Because
So
of
it wasn't that Paul named Jesus. Jesus, for one, is a very divine name in general. For two, Philo of
Yeah, yes, it was.
Alexandria identifies the same kind of figure and points back into the Old Testament, where he assigns this archangel figure to this high priest in Zechariah, and that high priest's name is Jesus. So it seems like Jesus is a convenient name for the Messiah, and so it's very easy to come to the conclusion that that would be one of the names given to the Messiah.
Do you acknowledge that Paul was persecuting the people who believed in Jesus when he was going there?
I mean, that's what Paul claims, so I don't see any reason to deny that.
Okay. Why did he change his mind?
Why did he change his mind? Probably he had some kind of bereavement hallucination where he experienced, a revelatory Jesus coming to him, and this is probably due to his whatever kind of mental illness he was going through at that time, schizotypal personality disorder, and he probably had those particular feelings about it due to that.
Do you believe Paul met any of the other apostles?
Apostles, yes. Disciples, no.
So you don't believe he met any of the disciples?
No.
What do you mean by apostles?
Apostles are those that were revealed Jesus after his resurrection.
Okay. So the apostles he met, did they also share the same hallucination?
I mean, they had hallucinations about the Messiah. I don't know if it's the exact same hallucinations, but they did have hallucinations.
And they just all happened to agree upon them.
They all happen to agree on the theology and the gospel of Jesus. If you're talking about the visual part of these hallucinations, I'm not exactly sure about that, but I don't think that they have to agree on the visuals of it in order to get the gospel right. If
you were convinced of the supernatural, which I don't know that you could be, would that then make Jesus maybe exist by Paul's writings?
If I believed in the supernatural, would I then believe in that Paul's writings reveal a historical Jesus?
Or that at least someone named Jesus who was in heaven at the time revealed themselves to Paul?
No, I would not. I would not believe that. You still have a long way to go to show that Jesus actually exists. And that's
Jesus Paul wrote about? I'm not even talking about the Gospels. Jesus is the one Paul wrote about.
Right, and the one that Paul wrote about is a pre-existent divine angel figure that is the high priest of God and the agent of creation and all this other stuff. And you still have a long way. Like even if,
Sounds like Jesus.
Right, exactly. But Philo also identified this pre-existent archangel figure who is the image of God, the agent of creation, and the high priest of the high temple in heaven. Right. He also identified him, and Philo was still a Jew. He just named him the Logos as opposed to Jesus, but he identified him with a priest named Jesus.
Paul and all the other apostles and disciples were still Jews.
Right.
They just thought they were the correct form of Jews.
Sure, but just because you prove the supernatural does not mean that you're any closer to, proving Christianity.
Okay. So what would have to be done to prove that Jesus existed?
Like I said before, we would need some kind of textual evidence of somebody talking about a pre-crucified Jesus walking around Judea.
That's not the Gospel of Mark, because he doesn't say, "I saw this myself."
No, It's not the Gospel.
It's not textual evidence that says, "I saw this myself."
It's not the Gospel of Mark, because the Gospel of Mark is dependent upon Paul, and Paul's information doesn't come from any human source.
How do you know it's dependent upon Paul?
There are different positions that Paul explicitly says is his own particular opinion about things, and it does not say that Jesus said it or Jesus commands it, but yet in Mark, it turns it around and puts Paul's words into Jesus's mouth.
Okay, so you think Paul made up that whole story and gave it to whoever wrote Mark?
Paul made up what story?
The story of Jesus' earthly ministry.
I don't think that Paul ever talked about Jesus' earthly ministry.
Then how did Mark get that from Paul?
Mark knew Paul's letters, took Paul's words, and then claimed Jesus said them. So he made it up.
It's like fan fiction.
Well, I think that he made it up, and he used Paul's words in order to make it up.
I don't see why we would come to that conclusion.
Because Mark was written far after Paul.
Yeah, maybe, yeah.
No, definitely. So. Definitely, because Paul was unalived about 65 or so CE, and then Mark was written somewhere between 65 and 70, just after 70. So, like, Mark was definitely after Paul.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I gotta go, man, but it's been very fun talking to you.
All right. Yeah. It's been great talking to you, too.
Thanks, buddy. I hope you have a good day.
All right. You do the same. Bye, Soda. All right. I thought I was going to have to bust out the information about different points for Paul.